Set of questions, it's really trying to speak to the diversity we have within India. It's very tempting, especially from the outside, to see India, to talk about the Indian economies like this, etc. And we know that there's a lot of diversity. And so I would like to just have you speak a bit about how you see these different kind of models of development or trajectories of development within India of particular states. And there's a bit of study on this, maybe not as much as it merits, but I'd just like to know, how do you see the scope for state level governments to really steer development in a particular way? Do they have that kind of space to do that? I mean, we also read a lot about centralization within the kind of federal system, and of course with GST reforms we also talk about fiscal space sort of contracting and diminishing for state governments. I'd just like to have you comment on how you see this issue.
Yeah, so I think it's certainly true that there's a trend towards centralization, and in particular many states have lost their fiscal or some of their fiscal independence with the transition to GST. But I think there's still a lot that the states can do. And indeed, you're right to say that we're not paying enough attention to these state experiences and the state contrasts and what we can learn from them. There was a time, maybe 30 years ago, when Kerala stood out and everyone else was like way behind. And some people talked about the Kerala model, a term that I don't tend to use, but certainly it was obvious that Kerala had done something that the other states should learn from. In particular, a big early investment in education and also social reforms and so on. But today, I think we have a greater diversity of experiences. We have not only Kerala, but we have Himachal Pradesh, for example, which also had an extraordinary schooling revolution in the 70s and 80s, and virtually caught up with Kerala in that respect in a very short period of time, and then is enjoying very similar results now in the form of much better living conditions and I would say also more social equity. Then we have Tamil Nadu with its history of social reform, extensive welfare provisions, and efforts to bring about a modicum of social justice. And we even have some experiences in the erstwhile so-called Bimaru states, the undivided Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh, which used to be considered as a kind of basket case. And there are still problem areas to a large extent. But some of them are not doing so badly anymore. Chhattisgarh, for example, now is making pretty good progress in healthcare. It has achieved a remarkable reform of its public distribution system from around 2006 onwards. It's not doing so badly in child development. Orissa also has done some interesting reforms. So I think we have a much richer set of relatively positive experiences and an indication that what Kerala had done was perhaps not so unique after all. It's something that many other states may be able to achieve too. We don't really know. There was a time when Kerala was considered like such a puzzle, and there was a lot of discussion about what could explain it. I mean, was it the missionaries or the communists or Matrilinie or whatever? But now maybe the main thing is that they actually started early and they made big, very early investments in human development education. They had very strong social movements. And perhaps it's something that other states can also do to a large extent. I hope so. I don't know. I don't know if it will happen in a state like Jharkhand, which still seems to be mired in that pool of corruption and inequality and crime and so on. But I'm hoping that similar change can be brought about elsewhere as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean.
I would like to come back, cycle back to some of the issues that you had actually raised in the introduction. You said you spoke about how real wages have basically stopped rising in real time. I was wondering what was the impact, because you did touch on this topic of pandemic, and I would like to know a bit more. I would like you to comment a bit more on the impact of the pandemic on the economy, and more specifically on the people who came back, more specifically on the people who came back to Bihar, who came back to Jharkhand from Bombay, who took this buses and trains. Well, there were no trains. I think they were very late. The trains came into the picture, but many people came back. Have these people gone back to the cities? What is the condition? What is the impact of the pandemic on the informal sector? What do you see it on the ground?
So, as I said, we don't have a lot of information on this, at least not in the form of national surveys. I don't think we have any national surveys post 2020. We do know that during the COVID crisis itself, it was really hard for people, especially during the lockdown, but certainly for a fair amount of time after that, certainly until the end of 2020. For that year, we don't have any national official surveys, but we have a lot of small surveys done by independent organizations or NGOs. In fact, I think more surveys happened in that year than perhaps any time before in India. I did a review of these surveys with my colleague Anmol Somanchi, looking particularly at the effects on food security. And it was really alarming. I mean, across all these surveys, you had some very serious indicators of food insecurity, like people saying that they had to reduce their food intake, either in terms of quality or even in many cases in terms of quantity. There's one study, just to give one illustration, there was one study by a team of researchers at Yale who found that 60% of the returning migrants in Bihar, this is a sample of 20,000 returning migrants in Bihar, 60% of them said that they were not able to ensure 2 square meals a day for all members of their family. I mean, that's the kind of thing that was happening at that time. So there's no doubt that 2020 was a terrible year for the informal sector. And then, as I said, we don't really know too much about the extent to which it recovered after that. Wages apparently are not rising. You can see a lot of informal evidence that there is still a crisis. For example, where I live in Ranchi, you can see a lot of street vendors, like people who sell omelets, for example, on the street. You're smiling, but when you have nothing else to do, you can always do something like selling eggs. And that's why I don't pay too much attention in these unemployment figures, because for the informal sector, they're more or less useless. I mean, the person who is selling eggs is not unemployed, but that person is in deep trouble. So it's more underemployment than unemployment that matters. You can also see in the labor addas, the places where people stand in the morning in the hope of getting casual work, for example, in construction. You can see the numbers of men and now also a lot of women, the numbers of both men and women, much larger than before. So there are informal indications of this sort. About returning, whether they are returning, you ask whether the migrant workers have gone back to start migrating again. We know that many of them have started migrating again for sure, because they don't have a choice. I mean, they may have been traumatized during the lockdown, but they still don't have much to do in their villages in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh and so on. So large numbers definitely have started again migrating to Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Kerala, and so on. But probably fewer than before. How much less, I don't know. But I also know some people who said, no, I don't want to go through that again. I'm staying here and somehow surviving on my little plot of land or something.